UFO stories and UFO angle. I'm like, dude, man, this guy's got everything. Hey, you guys. We got an awesome podcast for you this week. A guest that's been on before, but man, every time he comes on, I get so excited. Let me do a shout out to my co-host. How you doing, Lindsay? What's up?
Doing well. Ready to get into this one. It'll be a nice break from a very dreary day here in the Delta.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of rain and these storms move through the southeast, but what's really cool is our guest is right here with us in the Delta. Usually we're interviewing people all over the United States, but our guest today is MK Davis, who is in Mississippi, right? MK, aren't you still in Mississippi?
Well, actually, yes, I live there, but actually I'm not there right now. I'm in Heavener, Oklahoma, about to go down and look at the Heavener Runestone.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
All right. Well, I was just about to say, tell us about it.
It's an enigma of its own. It's a huge stone with runes on it, which is Viking type writing.
Yeah.
And it marks a land boundary. People that can read those old runes. That's what it says. That's the cornerstone of land ownership. They tried to say that the Indians put it there. You know, the archaeologists and the scientists and the academics, they always go to something like that. And the Indians refused to even hear it. They said that thing was here before we were ever here.
Well, it's just that
it's Scandinavian Indians.
Yeah. Well, it's just that it's that naturalism, MK, that we're forced to have to deal with in the scientific world, where anything supernatural or anything out of the norm is instantly cut off, that it can't even be an option. And I don't see that as pure science, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, but when you immediately go into it and you cut off probably half of your ideas of what something could be, that's not very good science. So. Yeah.
Right. You're bottlenecking everything on it.
Yes.
Without having any reason for it.
Well,
if it's written in Nordic runes, then it must have been written by a Nordic person.
Absolutely. Or Joseph Smith's right, which I don't believe.
They've got a trail across America. They've got the East Coast, and they got the Kensington Stone, and then they got the Heavener Stone. All written in the same type of runic writing. So at some point in time, they penetrated deep into the heartland of North America.
Yeah. There's a lot of them, and I just Wikipedia'd it, so I've got my grains of salt here. But yeah, there's several. Looks like in Oklahoma.
I just left the Spiro Mounds.
Oh wow!
Which is they've had some remarkable stuff in the Spiro Mounds. They had a lot of incised conch shells.
Oh wow, that's cool.
That had the stuff that they had inscribed on there were identical symbols that you find that was found in tablets in Sri Lanka, describing a continent that sank beneath the waves called Lemuria.
Oh wow, Sri Lanka.
And those same symbols are on there, and they also found them on tablets that were dug up by William, I can't think of, a famous explorer. He dug them up in Mexico in early 1900s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that was one of the symbols of Quetzalcoatl, was the conch shell. Wonder if there's a connection there.
They also they showed the same symbolic symbols, like for God, they had a circle with a dot in it. They had a cross in a ring of fire, and it had 4 rays coming out. You find everything that you find like that in those tablets. You find also in the spiral mound, incised on conch
Oh,
shells.
wow.
That's cool.
They also showed something that's unique. They showed that the rays emanating from the sun did not strike the earth directly; it struck at the earth obliquely, and that's something they only knew in our time. Due to the rotation of the sun and the rotation of the earth,
That's
and
fascinating.
then the earth also rotating around the sun, that those rays, it takes 15 minutes to get to the earth. So by the time they get there, they're coming in at an angle.
Mm.
And they knew that.
How?
And that's that's an amazing thing. What I've been able to determine from looking at the artifacts and stuff is that they were kind of the same as the Natchez Indians. Their
Okay.
belief system was the same. They're on the Arkansas River, and if you follow the Arkansas River, it comes out right opposite the city of Rosedale, Mississippi, which is within Natchez reach.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Natchez went up the river and hid out several times, and then they had several branches of the Natchez, like the Tensas. So all that, believing that the big chief, they call him the big chief, white people do, but they call him the sun. He was a representative of the sun, and the great sun, they called him. And these people up here in Spiro was same thing, great sun. And they built their mounds very similar to Emerald Mound down there in Natchez along the Natchez Trace. The Natchez Indians said that they came from out west, and the archaeologists and stuff, and they didn't believe them. The French wrote that down. The French meticulously logged everything. There's not any Natchez left. There's some people who claim Natchez heritage, but not really. There's none left.
Yeah.
So all you have is what the French wrote down in their logbooks. Yeah, that's quite a thing. Matter of fact, the French wrote down the very first Bigfoot report in North America back in 16 or maybe 1721. I can't remember which. It's when they first came in there, and they logged it up as a beast that everyone was afraid of, and he came into camp and took a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
They sent that back to France, so it was officially logged.
Well, that kind of drums up 2 questions for me. And I'll go ahead and ask the first one that goes exactly with that. Are there, if they sent that story back to France, are there sightings of Bigfoot type hominids in Europe? I mean, I know there are in Asia, particularly China and the Yetis and that kind of stuff. But are there in Europe? Are there Bigfoot sightings in Europe, MK?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Europe's got some huge forests. They have what they call a woodwose. You might see it carved into the back of really fine chairs, wooden chairs.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen one at the doctor's office. It was on the front of a drawer. The face of a woodwose, which is a big hairy guy, hairy man, supposed to live in the woods there in Europe. They have woodcuts, and they have what is it, Grendel?
Yeah, Grendel. Yeah.
Beowulf
Beowulf
speaks of it. And then kind of like that in the Sumerian record. I think that one of their kings, Nebuchadnezzar, said he went crazy for 7 years and fed and ate grass like the beasts of the field.
I never connected those two
Uh,
things, but yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how well can you do eating grass. I wouldn't do too well.
No.
Not in your right
Uh,
mind.
uh, right, you know, it's a speculation, but you know, he might have been of that sort that had the hair, you know, like Esau covered in hair.
Hmm.
Mhm.
A hunter. He was of a hunter's disposition. He really wasn't very much of a spiritual person.
Right.
Uh, that type of thing. And getting back to you know, I think we were going to talk about UFOs. The Bigfoot UFO connection is something that has always been around. Some people don't like to discuss it, but there seems to be an inordinate number of reports, more than just chance. You know, people say that I saw a UFO and then
Right.
I saw a Bigfoot. You know, when you see them two connected together, if as a researcher, what is your responsibility to sift out what you don't believe, uh, or perhaps maybe just make notes of it and look for explanations, or maybe there's dots to be connected.
Well, you
Uh,
know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, MK, but years ago, I was listening to Coast one night, and they had this guy, and I wish I could remember this guy's name on the show, who wrote a book where he basically took maps and did investigation. And usually, anywhere you had Bigfoot sightings, you had UFO sightings, you had paranormal experiences, you had just eerie, just crazy, wild, fringy stuff. And they happen in certain areas, like pockets, like all those manifestations in those pockets. I found that I wish I could remember the name of the guy. I would love to read his book. But have you ever heard of that before, MK?
yeah, it wouldn't be Stan Gordon, would it?
I don't know, but I'm writing that down to check it out, though. I've been trying to find that book for like 3 or 4 years. It's crazy. Stan Gordon.
Stan Gordon, he's written quite a bit on that. The I consider him to be one of the premier researchers because he doesn't try to discriminate.
Mm,
You know,
true science.
he just writes down what he's told and looks into it as best he can. You know, uh, the UFO thing has been kind of something that's kind of sometimes it slips up on you. You don't expect it. For instance, Debbie and I were in Conway, Arkansas, to film the eclipse,
Mm-hmm.
and I set my camera up. I didn't have a sun filter or anything, so I had to really wait until it was almost eclipsed till it got dim enough, and then I started recording, and lo and behold, here comes a craft coming between me and the sun.
Oh, wow.
Right through that little little bright piece that wasn't quite covered, the little diamond they call it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and right out the top of the frame. And I have looked at that thing. It does a maneuver while it's coming across. It's turned to bottom right, upper left, inclined that way, and then it twists around to where it's the top right and bottom left. You know, it does a maneuver at a great speed. Like it reminded me of those Tic Tac things. You know how they would just be flying along and then just lay over.
Yes. Like the Tic
Uh,
Tac video out west, or the Navy Tic Tac video.
yeah, there's a lot of people who say that it's probably a satellite, and that may be true.
Yeah.
But when I get back home, I'm gonna do some work on that thing and try to just hold it dead center and see what that maneuver is and see what I can learn about it, if that's even possible. When you adjust a satellite, it's done over a period of time. It's not done in like
Right. Well, on one of the podcasts I listened to, they had this guy that actually would set up a time. Our phones can do time. What's it called? Time lapse photography. And
Yeah.
he would set it up in an open, spacious place on an uncloudy day, and he would just record the whole day, and you would be amazed at the craft that he would pick up. MK, I mean, and it's like what you're talking about. It's not just satellites because of the sheer speed of the movement of these things, and it's in time lapse, and they're moving fast. So that lets you know how fast they're moving in normal time. And, I don't know, that might be an experiment you could try. That'd be really fun. Set you a tripod up with your phone and just record for hours. I don't know. That would be cool. That sounds like what happened to you. You picked up a craft by accident.
Mm.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a piece of dust or anything. It's actually a craft.
Yes, sir.
You can look at it and tell. It comes flying across. Now, it could be one of those rockets they sent up there just for that, to look at the eclipse. But I
Yeah.
can't see a rocket making that type of twist
No.
in orientation that fast. So I'm going to look into that part of it because I think that may be ultimately what tells the tale on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the erraticness of these crafts just rules out anything human made. Just the up and yeah, I mean, just they're like bugs. I mean, they're not bugs, but they would be like if you were looking at a bug, they just fly all over the place like a bug does, which we know is possible because a bug does it. But yet, you just know it's a craft. It's just obvious that it's some sort of a craft. MK, the
Go ahead.
$2,000 question. So, what do you think these crafts are? What is your opinion of these crafts that we're seeing?
That is a good question. If it's not us, then who is it? Uh, that's if it's not us, then it has to be somebody from far away.
Yeah.
Mm.
Some extraterrestrial.
Yes.
That's I don't see any choice.
Well, what do you think about
Uh,
people who say intradimensional instead of extraterrestrial? Do you think that's just a quibble of
I,
words? Same thing?
Maybe they haven't actually proven interdimensional, but it's pretty much accepted. But I don't think anybody's come across through the dimensional portal and said I'm so and so from the other dimension.
Wow.
Not that it was provable.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, they cranked up
there's a lot of
CERN.
things.
They cranked up CERN this week too, didn't they? I mean, so that
Yeah,
throws
they
another
did.
another interesting portal esque thing that you might have saw. So anyway,
Yeah, they cranked up CERN, which that people theorize could have opened up a portal. But let me tell you this: the sun was in an unusual phase.
hmm.
It had one really huge solar flare, uh, and then it had two or three more in other places. All of these were easily visible, and they affected the corona, the shape of the corona.
Oh wow.
The corona was like kinked or bunched where that solar flare was.
I-
The corona is like 1,000,000 degrees. It's really the radiant part of the sun. I mean, it's putting it out.
Right.
You affect that corona, uh, you're gonna affect a lot of things. The weather here on all the planets, not just here.
Yeah.
Uh, if you cool the temperature, the cloud tops down, the upper atmosphere, uh, what 8 or 10 degrees during that darkness, it forces the jet streams to do unpredictable things. And they had two eclipses in a row way back when the Hohokam Indians were around in Southwest, in southern Arizona and New Mexico.
Yes, sir.
and they had one of the most extensive irrigation systems ever built. And by the time the weather patterns settled out after those two eclipses, there was none left. No Hohokam. They went out of existence
Oh wow.
because of what the weather did.
Wow. I mean, you hear about
Uh,
the government affecting the weather, but we don't take into account just the natural nature forces, particularly solar flares. I mean, I think I've read that you have the right kind of solar flare, it could EMP our entire planet, right? I mean,
oh, sure it could. They try to build protection into the spacecraft they have up there, but there's no guarantees even on that. Uh, if it's strong enough,
right?
it causes that impact impulse and blows out everything electronic.
Yeah,
We can mimic that. We can mimic it. We can mimic it with, a nuclear,
yeah, radioactive blast.
thermonuclear
Yeah,
explosion. Yeah, but it's nothing like the sun.
no,
The sun
no,
has 11-year cycles of sunspots. A sunspot is simply a cold spot, where its reaction is cycling through and almost goes out, and that's why it looks dark. And every 11 years you'll see a whole bunch of them, and
hmm,
as a good percentage of the sun will become non-conductive, and so the Earth will cool. And
wow,
it has nothing at all to do with what people are doing down here.
yeah,
It just happens, and so you look back in history, and they know this,
oh sure,
that it cycles.
yeah,
The temperatures cycle up and down. So I'm not saying that we can't do something to make it better, stabilize it in some way, but who's to say that we're doing the right thing by trying to interrupt natural cycles? Uh, maybe it's something that maybe we should try to learn to live with, and work with it rather than try to work against it.
yeah,
But this week I was sent a picture of this guy took while he was at a campfire up here in Oklahoma,
mm-hmm,
and it was this big triangle craft
yeah,
that was hovering over him. He took this picture.
wow,
It had the three lights on the three corners.
yeah, yeah.
It was a huge. What is that?
Yeah, that's such a weird geometric shape for flying. It's almost like it's like the underbelly of the Star Wars Star Destroyer or something. But I mean, yeah, a small craft like that flying, it seems weird for a triangle, particularly the way they're seen. They're seen at a different angle, like they're flying with the triangle part up, if I'm making any sense. Yeah, it's really it's a strange shape for a craft, I guess.
Well, they all know that a pyramid shape concentrates its energies along sharp lines,
Right.
and it can actually, a pyramid takes it all to one point. You might recall over in Japan they have the pagodas with the roof angles
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
curving.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they
I love
curve it.
that architecture. Yeah.
They
Beautiful.
keep the geoelectric forces under the ground because they have a lot of earthquake activity. The electric will concentrate on those sharp edges of a roof line and set it on fire. And so they learned over time that you could angle the roofs, and make a bow in it, kind of a gradual turn up without making them straight, and mitigate that some, and not set your house on fire.
Wow.
So they started building that way, and just a very observant people over long periods of time learn how to cope.
Right. Right.
Uh, That's energy, lots and lots of energy. So if anything's going to make a portal open up, it's energy,
Right. Yeah.
or hold a portal open.
Right.
Tornadoes have energy, have tremendous amounts of energy. I don't know if y'all recall the tornado last year that hit Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're right close to it. I mean, we're about 30 miles from it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, these storm chasers took nighttime video of it, and they saw these strange lights. They started near the ground, came around and spun around to the backside, and then when they came back around, they were up much higher up, and they were constant. They weren't blinking. And a year later, they had not yet figured out what those lights were.
Well, not to sound conspiratorial, but I am. That, if I recall, was a tornado that our president visited, which I don't think he visits every tornado. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it, but he appeared. He got the name wrong. He called it like the Rolling Stones or
Stone.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he visited that site, and I don't think they visit every tornadic site, but that's interesting that there was those lights there, and then he visited there. I don't know. My brain works like that, MK.
Yeah, well, there's something else to consider. That town is completely surrounded by Indian mounds.
Yes, let's talk that.
Okay.
Definitely.
Oh, okay. And when you left Rolling Fork, it immediately went straight to Midnight, Mississippi, and got a direct hit on an Indian mound there. And then it went straight to Silver City and hit an Indian mound there.
That's so wild.
Well, what are the chances?
Oh, yeah, exactly. What are the chances? Can I tell you something that, just a sidebar, that we've been doing a podcast series on Laurel Canyon out in California, and one of our episodes we had to do some research on Charles Manson, and this is going to sound so woo woo, but you bear with me, MK. We discovered that Charles Manson was moved to, wasn't it a prison, Lindsay, that was near Mounds, and all of a sudden he tell him the story about
I'd never got the whole prison thing. That was more Lavinda, I think, mentioned that he was, but just the area he grew up in was surrounded by mounds there in
Ashland, Kentucky.
Ashland, Kentucky, right, and adjacent parts of West Virginia. I mean, there's lots of mounds in that area.
Well, the Lavinda guy made he went to a prison, MK, and this petty thief, petty criminal, all of a sudden goes from a mediocre to low IQ to almost a high IQ to a genius. And he even has writings in his diaries and his journals about when he experienced some kind of an encounter. Lindsay can probably talk more about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Susan Atkins remembers him saying something about the infinite entering his cell in one of these prisons he was at, and whatever he called the infinite, I don't know, but yeah. And at some point, he did seem to be a changed person, obviously not for the better, but yeah.
Well, and the reason I bring all this up, MK, is what do you think about the relationship is between these mounds and just this supernatural power, the supernatural energy? Wow, I didn't know that about Rolling Fork. That blows me away. Wow.
Yeah, they have two mounds that are together called Carter Mounds.
Right.
Then they have two mounds on the other side of town called I forgot the name of that mound. It's a pretty good sized mound. It's actually two mounds close. and then they have another mound called Mount Helena
Oh
that's
yeah,
just outside of town.
yeah,
That's got a mansion on top of it.
yeah,
Yeah, I've
Um,
seen that. I think I've seen that one.
yeah. It's connected to the Annandale legend back at Chapel of the Cross over here, at Annandale Plantation over here in Madison. Yeah.
right, right. Also, the previous December, December previous to the strike at Rolling Fork,
Mhm.
they had a tornado hit Anguilla 5 miles away,
Mhm.
and it has a mound.
I'm sorry. That's
You may have
wild.
said it, MK. What's
it-
the mound in Silver City, or near Silver City?
It's on the golf course.
Oh wow!
They incorporated it onto the golf course.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago they did that with all the mounds. They just like when we read in Ashland, Kentucky, where Manson was from. It's like their city park. They like did a city park around this big mound. You know, it's like they don't even know. It reminds me of like the Poltergeist movie. It's like they don't even know what they're messing with, doing all this stuff around these mounds.
I've been on top of mounds where compasses would not settle out.
Wow.
Mhm.
They I don't know whether they had buried hematite in there,
Yeah.
you know, or something. But to me, you know, that's energy.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, the shamans were looking for guidance. That was their whole purpose,
Mhm.
was to have a vision to know what to do next.
Right.
And that's their way of praying to God, the Great Spirit. They go sit on top of a mound that, first of all, they were trained to sense earth energies.
Interesting.
So whenever it's like the Choctaws, they came from out west, and when they made it up there to Noxapater,
Yeah, Knox Pater.
they said, the shaman says, build here, and they built that mound, and it turned out that they had put it right on the edge of a buried impact crater where all the rocks were fractured,
Wow.
and they were all producing electrical currents, and that became their mother mound. And the shaman would go up there and they would beat drums at a certain rhythm,
Mhm.
and he would try to concentrate until he went into a trance and have a vision about what to do next.
Hmm.
He was their guidance, and they did not. If he was wrong very much, they would put him to death.
Mhm.
Interesting. Wow.
So he had a kind of a need to get it right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. The earth energies. These are spots in the earth where the piezoelectric energy is just volcanically coming out in the invisible realm.
All right. Does this relate, MK, to ley lines? Is this along the same similar grid?
It probably
like ley
does.
lines type
I
thing
wouldn't doubt
we're
that.
familiar with, or is this totally different?
Yeah, it probably does. If you make those connections, you know, like these tornadoes, just draw a line from one to the other. It seems to have a something guiding it or carrying it from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some kind of an electrical component besides just convection and air and everything.
Right.
It seems to have an electrical component. I've seen tornadoes hit for the first time, and then 5 or 6 more come along that same path before it finally let them alone.
That's interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
it's almost like it's like spiritual conduit or something weird, you know?
yeah, or something like that. And now, as far as Charles Manson goes, I have a rock that I believe belonged to him.
Oh wow!
Oh wow, cool.
I
guess.
I found it in a canyon in just outside of Death Valley, I was looking for the Devil's Hole, and I don't know if y'all know much about the Devil's Hole
Oh
and
yeah.
connections
He
to
thought that
the
was going to be
Manson
the place
claim.
where the abyss was, and where the
Yeah.
creatures
Right, he
would
was
come out of
going
the
to
abyss.
escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't get down in the Devil's Hole without scuba gear and everything, because you have to go underwater for a good long ways.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to this canyon. They went up the mountain and went into a canyon. And when I saw the canyon, I knew it instantly. I saw it in a documentary. It was the canyon that I went up. I couldn't find Devil's Hole, and I told the Siri kept saying, "You're at your destination," And I looked around. I don't see Devil's Hole. I said, "Well, there's the entrance to a canyon. Maybe it's up there." And me and Don Monroe went over there and walked up that canyon. And I noticed when we went into the canyon, there was a good sizable rock there that was completely wrapped in rusty wire.
Mm.
And was just sitting like where someone placed it on a pedestal. It's been there a long time, it done rusted. And when I saw this documentary and I realized that they had used that for a hideout, and I had found all these bones up in there, just laying here, there, and everywhere.
Mm.
And so something told me, I did not know this when I took, something told me to get the rock. That's all I can say. I toted it out of there because I knew that canyon was being marked by something. And I took the rock, and it's sitting in my man cave right now. And then I found out later on that that's where they hid out. The reason I knew it was the same canyon is because it had uniquely had blue stone in it. All the big stones were blue.
Wow.
And that way it was just a hop, skip, and a jump down there to the Devil's Hole.
Well, what mineral does blue? I mean, and is it something that releases energy?
Well, you pour water on it, and the water disappears.
Whoa. It absorbs it.
Yeah, I poured water on it. I got it on video. You just poured water, and I found a dry waterfall and just threw a bottle of water on there, and it sucked it up like a sponge. It didn't even go. It didn't even go to the ground.
Wow.
Wow, man. Wow.
And there we found an old mine halfway up a cliff where you had. I don't know how anybody could get up there and chisel out a mine. But they certainly did do it. I got on the mountainside on the other side and used my zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Was able to get video of inside of it,
Right.
and you can see where it had been chipped out. Miners had done it. So that's my weird connection with Charles Manson. I didn't find out till later on when I saw that documentary, and I looked down at that rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't associate Manson with Death Valley till I did some research on him recently. I mean, they were like Mad Max out there towards the end, just riding around dune buggies and just stealing whatever they could.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did the drug thing to the utmost. And there you got a guy with these mental issues and also having these connections with the energies,
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned.
Yeah.
That seems to drive him.
Yeah. Well, and
They do things that people normally wouldn't do.
yeah. When you throw drugs and hallucinogens in the mix, which was there, and you got a big cauldron full of just whole lot of weird stuff.
Well, while they were in that canyon, I think 3 of their members were executed.
Mm. Yeah.
Was that the bones that you found, MK?
Well, I couldn't help but think that.
That's the logical conclusion. Occam's razor. That's the easiest explanation. Wow. I'm sure it's all cleaned up now. If it's been on a documentary, I'm sure it's probably been, you know.
Oh no, you have to work mighty hard to get up in there where those bones were.
Oh,
I, c- I, I can't see anybody going that far up in there. I did, but
well, you had motivation. You were searching. A lot of other people don't really have motivation like that. You were trying to find the
yeah,
truth.
I come upon a rattlesnake that was pink.
Mm.
What?
Uh,
Pink?
and it turned out it was a really rare subspecies called the Panamint rattler. And this thing was stretched out there in front of me, great big snake. I tried to get my GoPro, it wouldn't work. I couldn't cut it on, it wouldn't come on.
Oh man.
So I got my camera, my big camera, and hung it by the strap on the pole I had, the hiking stick. I cut it on, got it going, and I filmed that snake up close. All the patterns on it and everything. I've been in that canyon 3 different times, and the state of Nevada has put water tanks up at the very top. When you go out the very top, there's 3 water tanks, and they built this little water kind of a dam out of concrete, and somebody had put bighorn sheep horns, bones, rocks, all along that dam on the top.
Oh, that's occultic, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. Wow.
That's way up in there. I mean, you have to really strain to get up in there.
It's
You
really
know, it's
really want it, huh?
yeah, it's in the upper elevations too. It's like mountain climbing or something.
Hmm. Wow. So
But that's what happens. If you go to those places, you get surprised.
do you still do journeys like that? The in-depth things that you used to do back in the 90s?
Well, my knees are pretty bad right now. If I could get my knees back in shape, I would probably be available to do those things. I'm having to go for the less strenuous things as it stands right now.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I get that. I'm only 50. But yeah, I think I would be like you. I'd be motivated to press in and to find out what I can find out. So tell us more about this relationship between these crafts and mounds. What else do you know about it? Or what other stories do you have about that?
Well, there's back in the '70s they had a outbreak, what you call a super major tornado outbreak, and they had F5s, and they were hitting towns that had mounds too. Inverness, Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
killed a bunch of people. It had a mound as well. Uh, what hitting a mound is not that surprising, but when you go from a mound to a mound,
Yes.
uh, that that's a little more. It's hard to believe that that's random
Yeah.
chance because what's the odds? How big is a mound? It can be fairly big, but in this overall scheme of things, they're easy to miss.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah, we have one somewhere around our area, the plantation we owned. Of course, when we bought it, we didn't have all the 15,000 acres, but on our plantation that we live on, we have about 80 left. But I don't know if the mound is on some that was sold back in the 15,000 acres or if it's still on the 80 that I have left because of what you're saying here. You get woods and growth, and you can't tell a mound from a hill, particularly up in the hill country where I
Yeah.
am. I'm right along that hill country on Highway 3, and it overlooks the delta. And it's hard to tell if it's is it a mound?
you mentioned these mounds. You're looking out over the delta from Highway 3.
Hmm.
Is that anywhere near the Warren County line?
Yeah, we're 3 miles from it.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you what. There's some spooky stuff goes on out there.
Like near
Uh,
there's a farm down there.
yeah, there's a Harris guy
Here,
that
that's it. There.
he 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 was going to go shoot some wild feral pigs
Mm-hmm.
that were getting his corn,
Yeah, they're horrible
and
up
he
there.
spotted two Bigfoot, and he sat there and watched them through a thermal scope for 30, 40 minutes. He said he didn't shoot at them. He wouldn't shoot at them. One was squatted down, the other one was standing up.
That's so wild.
You draw
I know him.
you
He's
draw a line.
that's crazy. I
You
didn't.
know him.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know that about him. I mean, I guess you keep that kind of stuff secret, though.
Yeah, he told me about it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's Daryl Wilson lives a little further back down the highway. He's had some. He said he sat out there on his porch and listened to him holler. There's a little creek that goes out into the delta from the hills,
Yes, sir.
and if you draw a line straight across, you're going to go right straight across 3 Indian mounds that cluster. It's got more weird stuff happen. Bigfoot, UFOs, you can just about name it. I've gone out there, and me and a friend of mine, and we could hear something big jump into the river. It fell out of a tree. It didn't
Really?
It didn't just walk into the water. It jumped out of a tree. We could hear him holler. You know, we got it. I've got it on audio tape.
That's wild.
That big old long drawn out holler.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. It's interesting you're bringing this up because when the Yazoo
Yes.
tornado hit a few years ago, I know you remember that, the real bad Yazoo when it tore up half of most.
Yeah.
Well, we were out of town, but my folks were still living up here, and they went down to the end of the driveway, which goes out on Highway 3 from the hills up here, and they watched that tornado go right along the course of the river, which, that's where the mounds are. And it went all the way up there and it jumped Satarsha. And interestingly enough, where it jumps Satarsha is where the gates of hell are. And I'm sure you've heard about those and you know all about that around here.
Yeah.
And it jumped right up there, and then it went to the northeast towards Yazoo. But it was around in that area. Yeah, I mean, now that you're saying this, I'm seeing all kinds of interesting things that I've never thought of before with the mounds. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. If it makes a person have a vision that wants to have a vision, it's possible that it can make you even when you don't want to have
Mm.
True.
Yeah.
True.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that type of energy comes out. There's another mound that's, I told you the Naniwaya mound was on the edge of an impact crater.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Well, so is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
It's built on the edge of an impact crater, and all that fractured rock underneath is just ions are just flowing out of the ground.
Yeah, that's just so. I mean, that's why I think that the ancients, kind of Graham Hancock ish type things from way back. I think they had electricity available. I think they knew how to work with energy and all. I mean, that's personally what I think the Great Pyramids over in Egypt and all this stuff were just conductors of electricity to have power. And so why wouldn't they do the same thing over here with mounds? Which
Anytime you create friction and movement, you create electricity.
yeah.
That's why they give you a little hand crank on the weather radio.
I just thought about the whole Tunguska blast in Siberia and the weird things associated with that for some reason. We talked about these mounds being close to impact craters, and I don't know. Wonder if that's related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the weird
Tunguska
legends
has
the
not.
Siberian people had about beings being around there and stuff.
It hasn't been explained, not adequately.
No.
No, you're right.
You know, I was listening the other day to you have heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes, sir. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Oh,
Fascinating.
well, what I did not know was that another incident happened in 1939 with a whole division of the Russian army were battling the Finns in Finland in a forest. And that night, something horrible happened to them, and they ended up with very similar injuries. The whole army had just about wiped them all out. The ones that didn't wipe out were so scared they wouldn't go back. They had their tongues ripped out and their wounds that are just extreme burns on them, and they were blaming the Finnish army. And the Finnish army said, "We didn't do it."
Wow.
But it was very similar. I was familiar with Dyatlov, and when I heard it, gosh, that sounds almost like Dyatlov, but just on a bigger scale. People were terrified. They could see shadows going between the trees and stuff, but they couldn't get a shot at them. They were just like specters, and they would just do horrible damage to them.
Wow.
wow.
Specters.
Yeah,
That's wow. This is
you can look that one up.
Okay.
It's historical.
what was the other it's in Finland, right? In Finland.
Right, it was the Russians versus the Finns, and they got a piece of something that they didn't want.
Was this during the World War II? I mean, did Finland take the side? Weren't they invaded by Germany, I think?
No, they actually took the
I
side.
think
They're one of the few countries that kind of got a pass for joining the Nazis a little bit because they fought. When they fought against the Russians.
Yeah.
The Winter War, I think this was called, and they were kind of.
yeah, right. This happened in the dead of winter, just like Dyatlov Pass. You know, they were all in the cold. They had tents that were ripped open from the inside.
Oh wow!
This
It was weird stuff, just like that.
Yeah, this just echoes a show that Lindsay and I just watched a few months ago. It's kind of interesting. And I think that the Native Americans knew about this kind of stuff. Of course, I mean, up in Finland, it would be whatever their Aboriginal tribes. I guess maybe Vikings or Celts or something. But yeah, I mean a Yeti-ish type situation, but also just supernatural type super.
Yeah, they said they saw monsters.
Yeah,
That's the only way to describe it.
yeah, monsters. And I've heard Bigfoot called monster before, but generally that's not what people say when they see a Bigfoot. They don't say, "Oh, it's a monster." I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I guess he's in our Americana culture enough that you see something hairy that stands up walking in the woods, it's going to be a Sasquatch. So
Well, after a while, you quit thinking, "I've got a gun. I'm going to do something to them,"
yeah,
because they couldn't do anything to them. They couldn't get a shot at them.
well, that's yeah. I
Yeah,
think that's kind of the woo woo, which I don't disagree with, but kind of the supernatural aspect of them, isn't it? MK, that
but except that they turned around and inflicted these horrible physical wounds on them. See, that's not necessarily. It may be supernatural in origin, but it's you can sit there and measure a wound or quantify it. So it's scientifically there.
definitely.
Something happened to those people, and they kind of kept it under wraps.
Dyatlov Pass is always always kind of yeah, and it reminds me of there's this another story, a similar type story. I wonder the if we could pick some stuff out of it is the about the guys out in I think it was in California where they were kind of mentally challenged guys. They were going up to a basketball game and they took a side road
Yeah, I know what you're
and
talking about. I can't
and
remember.
they completely disappeared.
Yeah,
I can't remember the story though. I don't know the name of it.
I they call them the something five or the Yuba Five or
That's it.
something like
Yep,
that.
Yuba, California. That's it. The Yuba Five. Yep. That's
Yeah,
a similar type
yeah,
story, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. Unexplained.
well, and it's in the winterish time. It was, it was like the end of the winter. They were just doing basketball season, so it was still kind of cool up there. And they found them in all different places, and one of them I think they found in a trailer. I don't know if they were all dead or if seems like one of them was missing, but yeah, I mean that when I think about that story, I think about the Dyatlov Pass story, and I think about the story you just told us. I mean, that's just too bizarre. I'm gonna check out that Finland-Russian thing. That's fascinating. Fascinating.
Well, that's another reason that I don't dismiss people when they use instrumentation designed for that,
Right.
like EMF meters. I just that's just another tool in the tool chest to tell you or give you some kind of inclination that something's going on in the energy field.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not too big on
Uh,
like spirit boxes and stuff because that's kind of, but yeah, when it comes to what you're talking about, EMF and electromagnetic things, I mean, anything paranormal or supernatural is going to emit some kind of electromagnetic frequency because they're made up of energy like we are.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
it,
so much for being on our show. We
yeah.
appreciate it, and we want to have you back again.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.